two shrubs 40 feet apart, bought off the same garden centre cart the same spring. One gets watered every evening, fed every April, and mulched like a prize. The other gets mowed around and occasionally backed into by a car. Every June, the ignored one carries blue heads the size of dinner plates, and the pampered one is a beautiful green ball without a single flower. But watering and feeding had nothing to do with it. That gap was opened the day those shrubs left the store, and once you know why, you can fix it in one season. The suspects come off the table first because I spent the better part of a decade blaming the wrong ones. Same street means the same rain fell on both plants. Same neighborhood almost always means the same soil, the same clay or the same sand, the same summer humidity, the same first frost. If care were the difference, the fussed-over shrub would win. It doesn't. So care goes off the list, and that leaves the one variable nobody thinks to check, which is what species is standing there. My own version of this took 10 years. Early in my border work, I planted a big leaf hydrangea against a client's picket fence, a mophead with heads that came out of the pot the exact blue of a robin's egg. It leafed out gorgeously every May, thick green leaves the size of your palm, and every June it gave me nothing. Down the block, in a yard where the owner mowed the lawn and did little else, a hydrangea with white domes the size of soccer balls bloomed from June until the heads went tan in September. I fed my plant more. I watered it deeper. One year, I dug in a bag of aged manure around it like I was tucking in a child. Green ball. No flowers. It took an old nurseryman I was buying bare root peonies from to ask me one question, which was whether I knew what kind of hydrangea it was. I didn't. That question was the entire answer. The mechanism works like this, and the rest of this video hangs on it. The hydrangea nearly everyone buys is the big leaf. Hydrangea macrophylla, macro, phyll, the mop heads and lace caps with the big rounded or flat heads in blue, pink and purple. Big leaf hydrangeas form next summer's flower buds on this summer's stems, roughly from July through September. Those buds then sit near the tips of bare woody stems all winter long through every cold snap, every ice storm, every thaw and refreeze. If those buds survive to spring, you get flowers in June and July. If they die, the plant is fine, but the season is over before it begins. Two other hydrangeas work completely differently. Panicle hydrangea, botanically Hydrangea paniculata, paniculata II, is the PG of old farmhouses and the limelight, quickfire and bobo, you see at every garden centre now. It carries long white cones that open cream in July and August and blush pink or lime as September cools. Smooth hydrangea, sold as Hydrangea arborescens or ESSNs, is the Annabelle and Incredible type, big white snowball heads through June and July. Both of these build their flower buds on brand new growth that pushes out in spring. Their buds do not even exist during winter, so winter has nothing to kill. You could cut a panicle hydrangea to your knee in March and it would still bloom that summer. Go out in January and you can see the entire gamble with your own eyes. On a big leaf, the stems stand there like a fistful of grey pencils, and near the tip of each one sits a fat, pointed bud, often with a slightly reddish cast, wrapped in scales. That is next June's flower, fully formed, waiting. On a panicle or on a smooth hydrangea in January, there is nothing of the sort, just bare stems and small leaf buds, and the flowers that will open in July haven't been invented yet. One thing I learned the hard way, and the Cape Cod growers say the same. Scratching a big leaf stem in spring and finding green under the bark does not mean the flower buds survived. The stem can be alive and the buds at the tip can be dead. You have to wait until the buds either swell and open into leaves or stay dark and dry into late May before you know what you have. That single genetic difference, old wood versus new wood, is the thing that decided who blooms on your street. And in cold country, it decides it before you ever pick up a hose. The cold climate reality deserves plain words because I've watched too many people in Minnesota and upstate New York and Iowa buy a blue mothhead in bud and go home hopeful. The University of Illinois Extension writes that bigleaf hydrangea grows in Zone 5 but does not usually flower there because it flowers on last year's wood, and in Zone 5 the plant dies back to the ground, so there is no old wood. The Morton Arboretum outside Chicago says bigleaf flower buds are generally not hardy in Zone 5 and colder. Purdue's extension horticulturist described the same shrub across much of Indiana as producing abundant new foliage, but no flowers because it is usually killed to the ground. Other extension level guidance puts the reliable line at about Zone 5B and notes some bigleaf types struggle even in Zone 6. Read that the way a detective would. The roots survive the winter, so the plant is alive. In May, it pushes lush green shoots from the base, so it looks perfectly healthy. And it is perfectly healthy. It just has no old stems left, and old stems are the only place a big leaf can carry flowers. You have a shrub that is genetically incapable of blooming where it lives, and it will look wonderful doing it. Panicle and smooth hydrangeas, meanwhile, are rated to Zone 3. Same winter, same street, and you can fight it, and I've done it. The old method is a cylinder of chicken wire or hardware cloth around the shrub in late November after the leaves drop, stuffed loosely with dry oak leaves or straw up over the stem tips. Then a scrap of burlap tied around the outside to keep the wind from stripping the insulation. You leave that on until the forsythia is done in spring, then unwrap it and pray. In a Zone 5 garden I tended for a doctor for 6 winters. It worked 3 of those 6 years and gave me sky blue mopheads that made cars slow down on the street. The other 3 years, nothing, and every year it was an afternoon of work in the cold for a maybe. That's the trade, and I want you to see the price of it before you sign up. If you're in Zone 6 or 7 and thinking this doesn't apply to you, hold on, because this is where the story turns. Even in milder zones, one harsh or badly timed winter can wipe out bigleaf buds across an entire region. After the polar vortex winter on Long Island, a New York television news crew went to Old Westbury Gardens, 200 acres of some of the most carefully tended beds in the country, and the director of horticulture reported that not one of their bigleaf hydrangeas flowered. A landscape designer at Hicks Nurseries in Westbury put it in one sentence, that the winter was so harsh those buds got killed. A homeowner in that same report had a 70-year-old hydrangea that had never once failed him, all new growth that year and no flowers. When it happens to a 200-acre estate with a full staff, you can stop wondering what you did wrong. There's a subtler version of that winter that fools even experienced growers, and it caught me in a client's garden about 15 years ago. Hydrangeas are among the last shrubs in the yard to drop their leaves. In a warm November, they're still green, still soft, still finishing those flower buds. If a hard freeze arrives suddenly before the plant has properly gone dormant, the buds get caught unhardened and they die, even in a winter that ends up mild overall. That November, I remember standing in the bed in shirt sleeves in the 3rd week of the month, and 10 days later it was 12 degrees. The following June, no flowers on any of the 6 mopheads, and I couldn't figure out why until I thought back to how green they'd still been at Thanksgiving. Now to the part that answers the question people asked me most, which is how the same species can bloom on one side of a street and fail on the other. The answer is a spring trap. A dormant bigleaf bud is fairly tough. Dormant, it can ride out real cold, but once you get a run of warm days around 50 degrees and up, the bud wakes and starts to swell, and the moment it does that, it throws away its freeze tolerance. A frost that a dormant bud would have shrugged off now kills a swelling bud outright. Landscapers on the New Jersey coast documented this year by year. One spring they had 4 consecutive days above 75 degrees in mid-April. Then on April 16th, the overnight low fell to 29 and it snowed. Their endless summer hydrangeas showed swollen buds along the canes that were dead, and by mid-May the only new growth was coming from the base. The New York Botanical Garden described the same April 16th frost as the worst big leaf damage their curator had seen in more than 15 years. So a whole street lost its flowers, except the yards where the plant hadn't woken up yet. There is a small thing you can do about this in a milder zone. Once your big leaf buds have started to swell in April, watch the 10-day forecast like a farmer. If a night below freezing is coming, drape an old bedsheet or a length of frost cloth over the shrub in the late afternoon, right down to the ground so it traps the soil's warmth, and pull it off the next morning. I keep 3 worn flannel sheets in the garage for exactly this, and my wife stopped asking about them years ago. And that's the sighting lesson, and it runs backwards from what your instinct says. A big leaf against a warm south-facing wall, soaking up reflected heat, wakes up early. That early bud break is exactly what gets frosted. A big leaf on the north or east side of the house or under the high shade of an oak stays colder, longer, wakes later, and often slides in under the last frost. I've moved 3 client hydrangeas from a south foundation to an east one, and 2 of the 3 started blooming again the second summer. The flip side is also true, and I want to give you both, because your street may split along these lines exactly. Cornell Cooperative Extension has observed that gardeners near masonry walls, in urban settings, and near large water bodies consistently get better big leaf results, because those things moderate the deep winter lows that kill dormant buds. So the neighbor tucked between a brick garage and a big lake has an advantage that has nothing to do with skill. Wind exposure strips buds. A low corner of the yard where cold air pools becomes a frost pocket, and I once lost an entire lace cap hedge to a swale at the bottom of a client's lawn that was 3 degrees colder than her front steps on the same night. Reflected heat off a driveway wakes a plant early. Same species, same street, different odds house to house. The trail runs back to where the mystery began, which is the store. In spring, grocery stores and big box stores are full of potted big leaf hydrangeas in full bloom, wrapped in foil, priced to go. Those are florist plants, gift plants. They were forced into bloom in warm greenhouses, fertilized hard, grown in a soilless mix, and never once cold conditioned. Hydrangea specialist Lorraine Bellato writes that the flower buds on those plants aren't hardy and don't stand up to average winter and early spring conditions, so no new flowers come, with exceptions in mild places like Atlanta and the Pacific Northwest. Horticulture magazine advised readers not to expect much bloom from a young hydrangea planted out for its first 2 or 3 years. I've read one gardener's account of a florist hydrangea that took nearly 10 years to flower again outdoors. The blue heads in the pot were greenhouse blooms. They are a photograph of what the plant can do, and they are no promise of what it will do in your yard. When you're at a real nursery, read the tag for the hardiness zone and for the words new wood or panicle or arborescens, and buy a plant that has been growing outdoors in a nursery pot, ideally one that isn't in flower yet. A hydrangea that looks a little rough in May because it spent the winter outside is a far better bet than one that looks like a wedding centerpiece in April. I confess I have bought those foil-wrapped plants for a friend's porch and hoped anyway, so if you did too, you're in good company. But now you know what you're looking at, which brings us to the practical question. Because most of you don't have the tag anymore, how do you tell what you own? Walk out and study the flower shape and the stems. Rounded mophead balls or flat lace cap plates in blue, pink, or purple on thick grayish-brown, rough-textured lower stems that look almost like driftwood, and you have a big leaf, the oldwood group. Long white cones that fade to pink or lime standing up on woody upright stems that don't flop, and you have a panicle, white or greenish balls on thin floppy stems that fall over into the lawn after every rain, and you have a smooth hydrangea, almost certainly Annabelle. Deeply lobed leaves shaped like an oak leaf with white cones and burgundy fall color, and that's oak leaf hydrangea. Oak leaf blooms on old wood too, but it's a hardier and different case, and I'll save it for its own video. One warning I wish someone had given me early. Lacecap is a flower shape, not a species. Both big leaf and mountain hydrangea come in lacecap forms, so a flat plate of flowers tells you the shape and nothing else. One shrub diagnosed. The Flower Gardener's Bible book cover holds all 38 plants and the month-by-month calendar, $9 at the URL bloomrelay.co. The plants that were supposed to fix all of this are the Rebloomers, and I want to be honest with you about them because the marketing hasn't always been. Endless Summer, sold under the cultivar name Bailmer, was introduced in 2004, and it was the first remontant big leaf, meaning it blooms on old wood in early summer and again on new wood later. It opened the door for Bloomstruck, with its red-purple stems and rose to violet heads, the Let's Dance series, and a dozen others that now crowd the benches every spring. If you garden in a warm climate, these earn their keep, and you'll get flowers into October. Rebloomers in zones 4 through 6 often lose the old wood flowers to winter, and the new wood flowers arrive in September at the earliest, if at all, because the plant has to be kept growing vigorously and continuously all season to build a second set of buds. A short growing season runs out the clock. Even the grower's own guidance says a rebloomer should be treated as a strictly old wood plant and not cut back, and that if it shows lots of dead wood year after year, the site is wrong and the plant should be moved. I've had exactly one endless summer perform as advertised in a cold garden, and it lived in a courtyard between two brick walls. Everywhere else, it gave me a handful of September heads, lovely and late. If you're finding this useful, subscribe. I do a video like this every week on plants that come back better each year, and next week I'm on the 15-year-old peony that stopped flowering. The rebloomer I reach for now in cold or frost-prone gardens is a different species entirely. Mountain hydrangea, botanically Hydrangea serrata, say RAH2, evolved in the cold mountain forests of Japan and Korea. Its buds and stems are hardier than bigleaf. It stays dormant later in spring, so it dodges those mid-April traps that catch bigleaf swelling. And the reblooming forms, the Tough Stuff series and others, push a second wave on new wood if the first buds die. Tough Stuff itself is a compact lace cap, waist-high with rosy pink to periwinkle florets from June through September, and small dark leaves that never look coarse, and it fits at the front of a border where a moped would swallow everything around it. I planted 5 of them along a shaded walk in a Zone 5 backyard 4 years ago, and they have flowered every summer since, which is 4 more summers than the big leaf they replaced managed in 12. The old cultivar blue below is a lace cap the color of faded denim, a ring of larger sterile florets around a center of tiny fertile ones, blooming from June into August, then aging to a deep crimson that echoes the burgundy the leaves turn in October. A writer for fine gardening in Zone 7 watched her big leaves lose their buds to late frost for 25 years, then planted blue billow beside a blossomless big leaf, and the mountain hydrangea bloomed year after year with better results. That's a controlled experiment in a home garden. And it's the same experiment your street is running. One more useful piece of botany. Only big leaf and mountain hydrangeas change flower color with soil acidity, blue in acid soil, pink in alkaline. So if your neighbor's white flowers never change, no matter what they do to the soil, that alone tells you it's a panicle or a smooth type. And that means it's on new wood. And that means it will bloom every single year, no matter what winter does. Your neighbor's plant may have a hometown, and it's worth knowing because it changes how you see it. Around 1910, a woman named Harriet Kirkpatrick was riding a wooded trail in Union County in southern Illinois, near the town of Anna, when she spotted a wild, smooth hydrangea carrying heads far bigger than any she'd seen. She and her sister dug it up, hauled it home, and planted it in the family yard. For the next 50 years, it had no name. It went from that yard to a neighbor's yard, to a cousin's, to a church, division by division, a local treasure passed hand to hand until it reached Urbana by about 1935. In 1960, a University of Illinois professor named Joseph McDaniel saw it in an Urbana garden, followed the trail back to Anna, registered it, and released it commercially in 1962. He named it Annabelle, Anna plus Bellies, for the town and the sisters who found it. That is the plant with the big white domes on the floppy stems in half the yards in America. The heads open lime green in early June, mature to clean white, hold for 6 to 8 weeks through June and July, and fade to a soft tan that stands through winter. Hardy from Zone 3 to 9, and every one of those flowers on new wood. When your neighbor hands you a shovel and a division over the fence, you're taking part in the exact same thing that spread this plant across half a century before it had a name. I keep a division of Annabelle from a client's grandmother's garden in my own back border, and it has not missed a June in 22 years. If you want to be the neighbor who passes one along, do it in early spring before the leaves unfurl. Drive a sharp spade straight down through the outer edge of the clump, lift a piece the size of a dinner plate with roots attached, and plant it at the same depth in a spot with morning sun and afternoon shade. It sulks for a month and blooms the first summer. Before the fix, one exception to everything I said about care not being the difference, because it's the one thing you can do to a big leaf that will cost you flowers on its own. If you cut it back in fall to tidy the bed or cut those grey pencil stems to the ground in early spring because they look dead, you have thrown next June's flowers on the compost pile. On a big leaf, prune only after the flowers fade in summer, and in spring cut out only what is clearly dead, once the living buds have opened enough to show you which is which. Your neighbour who never touches theirs is by accident pruning correctly. I've had to break the news to more than one tidy gardener that their fall cleanup was the murder weapon. Now the honest fix, and it starts with what not to do. If you have a big leaf in zone 5 or colder and you want blooms every year, more fertilizer will not help you and can make it worse. Nitrogen pushes soft leafy growth, and soft leafy growth is exactly what you already have too much of. And a big leaf planted next to a lawn that gets fed on schedule is soaking up that lawn nitrogen all summer, growing leaves at the expense of buds. Heavy late-season watering and feeding also keep the plant growing soft into fall, the last thing you want going into that first hard freeze, when you need stems hardened off and dormant. The reliable answer is one of 3 moves. Plant a new wood bloomer, a panicle like limelight, with its lime to pink cones from July into October, or a smooth like Annabelle or Incredible with white domes in June and July. Panicles want more sun than big leaves, at least 6 hours, and they reward you for cutting them back by about a third in late winter, with fewer, larger cones on stiffer stems. Smooth hydrangeas do the opposite of what your instinct says. If Annabelle flocks into the lawn every July, stop cutting it to the ground and instead cut it back to about knee height in late winter so it builds thicker, older wood at the base to hold those heads up. Or plant a mountain hydrangea, which gives you the lace cap look and the color-changing blue and pink without the big leaf's fragility. Or, if you love the moth head you have and can't part with it, move it to a truly protected spot, east or north side, out of wind, off the frost pocket, near masonry if you have it. Do that in early fall or early spring in cool soil and give it a full season before you judge it. The reframe I want you to leave with is this: that green ball with no flowers says nothing about you as a gardener. It's a climate and variety mismatch, and it was set up at the checkout counter, sometimes years ago, sometimes by whoever owned the house before you. The strategy I use in every cold country border now is companion planting the 2 groups. Keep the big leaf where it's sheltered and let it be a bonus in the years it delivers. Then plant a panicle or an Annabelle type somewhere else in the same yard, so that whatever winter does, something in your beds is carrying big hydrangea heads every summer. In a good year, you get both. In a hard year, you still get one. And I promise you the neighbour with the reliable one will be envious of the blue mophead in the year it finally comes through. 2 last practical notes on getting the new plant established, because timing matters more here than people think. Plant in a cool season, fall or spring, so the roots can knit into the soil before extreme heat or extreme cold arrives. Early fall works beautifully as long as the plant gets several weeks of cool soil before the ground freezes, and it means the plant wakes up next spring already at home. And if you're growing any hydrangea in a container in zones 5 or 6, remember that a pot freezes solid at temperatures the same roots would survive in the ground. Move it into an unheated garage or shed for the winter, water it lightly once a month, and bring it back out when the forsythia blooms. That's the mystery, start to finish. It was never a lack of care. It was the wrong shrub for the winter it lives in. Go out this week and check your stems and your flower shape. Decide which group you own, and if the answer is big leaf in a cold zone, put a limelight or an Annabelle in the ground this fall. Then next June, when your neighbour asks how you finally did it, you can tell them plainly that you stopped trying to feed a plant into doing something it was never built to do.